let's get this party started. I always forget that you're usually supposed to wait a minute before it starts so that it's live on YouTube. So I'm not forgetting now. So it says recording, so I think we're good to go. So I will call to order the October 24th, 2024 meeting of the Public Safety and General Government Committee of the Common Council. I am not the usual chair, but Chair Jalen Seed is not available tonight, so I am subbing in for him in his stead. With us tonight, committee members Nicole Ayers, Nicole Eady, Jim Freyer, myself, Josh Goldstein, Doug Sutton is here, and council member Heather Dunn. So council members all. In addition, for the minutes, I see council member Nora Najelski-Eichner is here, council president Darlene Young. I think that's it on council members. I think I've got everybody.
Ann Wennerstrom.
Oh, yes. Brand new council member, Ann Wennerstrand, is here as well. And then, so that I think covers council members who are here. So that's the roll call. I will now open it up to public participation. Just a reminder on the ground rules. You get 3 minutes and it has to be related to a topic on the agenda. So I do see that there is a hand raised. So Elsa,
Hello.
The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Chair Goldstein. So I would like to speak about the agenda item of reapportionment. I recognize you're probably tired of hearing from me, but I have a responsibility to my first taxing district constituents to stand up for the integrity of our district. I know that not many people have spoken up about the reapportionment. I think the reasons why they haven't include lack of information about the process, because it has not been easy to follow on the city website. People have busy lives and they don't have time to delve into this type of thing. Most people are not voting map nerds, as I am. And so they probably view reapportionment as a wonky kind of exercise. Maybe they don't think it will do any good to speak up. And finally, they may not want to offend people who are going to be moved from District A to District C under the plan that is before you. May not want to offend people in District C, because then if they end up in District C, they don't want people to, think negatively of them because they said something to the effect that they don't want to be moved into District C. The point for my comment is that Norwalk's taxing districts are legally defined entities in the city charter and in special legislation at the state level. The reapportionment task includes a duty to keep each taxing district within a single common council district where practicable, and to avoid splitting up communities of interest. We have a practicable solution, which is the plan that Registrar Stuart Wells submitted in July. And that is what I believe you should follow. If modifications to it are needed, that's certainly understandable, but that type of plan would accomplish what needs to happen without breaking up the first taxing district. Thank you.
Thank you, Elsa. Excuse me. I see Todd Bryant has his hand up. Todd.
Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I see that I did send you all a letter, an email, and I did not see it in your package. So I'm going to read it into the record just for drill, if nothing else. And what it said was, the Norwalk Preservation Trust strongly supports keeping the center of District A intact. It is the historic center of the old borough of Norwalk and should not be politically divided. This area includes the Norwalk Green and its surroundings, including the Norwalk Green Historic District, Norwalk Historical Society, Norwalk Historical Society's townhouse, a former city hall at Mill Hill Historic Park, and 2 historic churches. It also includes the boundaries of the first taxing district, which was created in 1913 during the consolidation. This part of central Norwalk was the borough of Norwalk from 1836 until incorporation to the first city of Norwalk in 1893. In 1913, the separate cities of Norwalk and South Norwalk, as well as the unincorporated portions of the town of Norwalk, consolidated to form the current city of Norwalk. So there is a reason for this, all of this to exist where it does as a single political entity. Dividing this historic area into 2 council districts serves no purpose. It would complicate the city's governance by having each half of this now cohesive area represented by different council members. It would also put the first taxing district, a remnant of the old city of Norwalk, into 2 districts. This division would make it difficult for citizens of those districts to knowledgeably vote for first taxing district candidates for its governing body. The plan proposed by Registrar Stuart Wells accomplishes the goals of redistricting without disruptive division. His deep knowledge of Norwalk and the voting districts far exceeds that of any consultant. He also takes practical aspects of population of the area as well as Norwalk's history into account in his plan. We are amazed and distressed that his recommendations are ignored. We urge you to follow Mr. Wells' plan to redistrict it appropriately and to respect our own history. And that is what we have to say. This is not a mistake. It's not random. The reason District A exists the way it does is because of a history that goes back to 1836. And to start carving it up for, as the consultants have suggested, I don't think really does anything good for the city. It fragments things. Half the green is in one district, the other half is in another district. It really makes no sense to me.
Todd, you crossed the 3-minute threshold, so if you just need to wrap.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's really all I have to say. I would just be reinforcing it over and over. So thank you for allowing me to speak and for allowing me to read this too.
Is there anyone else who would, in the public, who would like to participate and make comment? Well, seeing as the only 2 attendees on the list are the people who have commented, I'm assuming the answer is no, but going once, going twice.
Josh, just a quick question. I did receive at 5 o'clock this evening, a written email for public comment. Should I just include that in the packet for the minutes?
Sure. Yes.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But I think at this point, unless there's anyone else, I'm going to close public participation. I'd like to entertain a motion for acceptance of the minutes for the July 25th, 2024 meeting. Councilmember Dunn. Does anyone have any corrections, deletions, any alterations that need to be made to the minutes? If not, I'll entertain a vote. All in favor? Okay, so that's council members Dunn, Edie, and Sutton in favor. Any opposed? I'm going to go with no. I'm going to abstain because I was not present at the meeting.
I'm also abstaining.
Okay, Councilmember Ayers is out.
This is
Also.
Nicole.
Okay. So now we're at new business, and I'll read the item in. Reapportionment Committee, discuss and vote on sending the redistricting 2024 proposed plan, map, and recommendations for redistricting opportunities after each census, each as accepted by the Reapportionment Advisory Committee to the Common Council. I know we are going to have a presentation tonight from Arkbridge, who's the consultant who's helped the Reapportionment Advisory Committee. I just want to first sort of, before we get into this, I do want to recognize the efforts of the members of the Reapportionment Advisory Committee who have taken their time out of their busy lives to really get into this and delve into an issue that has not been looked at since the early 60s. So I know some are here tonight, but I'm just going to read and recognize everyone, Chairman Ken D'Orenzo, and members Diane Cece, Kia Gibbs, Scott Goodwin, Diana Palladino Christopher, Brenda Penn Williams, Jody Proct, Susan Remsen.
I responded and he basically,
I'm sorry. Okay. And I know Stuart Wells participated as a ex officio non-voting member, as did Diana Palladino Christopher. Ken, I don't know if there's something you wanted to say on the record before we turn it over to Arkbridge. Just wanted to give you the opportunity if you wanted to say anything tonight.
I, at this point, I think we should all listen to the process that the reappointment committee went through. We went through 4 separate options related to Stuart's comments, and we adjusted those each time with his comments, and we came up with an additional one with Diane Palladino Christopher's input, and that's what was submitted to council. But from this point, I think it's important that we hear Sam and Preeti. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Sam and Preeti, the floor is yours. I also want to recognize Steve Mednick, who's been served as valuable counsel to the city and to the council, to the Common Council, and to the committee on this project. And I know Brian Candela is here as well, who's also been, as usual, invaluable to us all. So Sam and Preeti, the floor is yours.
Good evening to all of you. I want to introduce myself as Preeti Mathur from Arkbridge Consulting. I have Sam here with me as well. We have worked with the Reapportionment Advisory Committee since July, and we have listened to them. We are consultants, and we got all the expert advice from the RAC, and we put it together to present the option that the RAC has selected. So with your permission, I'm going to share my screen and make a short presentation.
Go ahead.
So today I'm going to show you the plan, the proposed plan as was accepted by the Redistricting Advisory Committee on the 12th of September. And before I show you the plan, I wanted to talk briefly about the decennial census. So the primary function of the decennial census is to count the residents in the country. The census is conducted every 10 years, and it provides the actual count. The data is used for several key purposes: apportionment, redistricting, federal funding allocation, demographic information, and data for policy making. The census data, once the census compiles the data, it invites the state representatives to view the data and to give their approval before the census releases the data to the public. Now, the purpose is to create this data set, which is called Public Law 94-171, and this data is specifically created for redistricting and reapportionment. This data is released by Census Geography. So the data is at blocks being the lowest level of geography, block groups, tracts, county, and state. And for redistricting at local government level, we use blocks, which is the smallest unit of geography. Now, census data contains official counts of population and demographic information by race and ethnicity. So we have total population as well as voting age population. Census blocks are used nationwide for redistricting purposes as they can be used as building blocks to create the districts. So let's talk about the redistricting process. The goal of the redistricting process is to distribute population as equally as possible between the districts. A deviation called maximum deviation of up to 10% between the most populated and the least populated district is a norm which is followed nationwide. So now we talk about the city of Norwalk. While redistricting is mandated every 10 years after the decennial census and to adjust the district boundaries and the population, apparently the city of Norwalk has not done any redistricting for several censuses. As such, the district and other boundaries are not in alignment with census block boundaries. Census blocks and data contained within our official counts of population and demographic information, and using this geography protects any jurisdiction from legal challenges. So now we look at the project requirements. So the purpose of this project was to evaluate the Common Council district boundaries and to ensure that they meet the requirements of law as stated in the city ordinance, and if necessary, based solely upon those requirements to assist the city in developing new district boundaries. So now if we look at the ordinance, there are 3 parts. So if you look at A, it says that the district should be substantially equal in population. Then B, it says, to the extent possible, consistent with preceding, establish a compact and contiguous form following geographical divisions, considering communities of interest and historical boundary lines, and shall further use best efforts to include the boundary lines of the taxing districts as defined in the charter within a single council district where practicable, and to follow the requirements of the Voting Rights Act. So now if we look at this, so we looked at the ordinance and we looked at the Voting Rights Act, and these are the requirements. Population equality, and that the maximum deviation should be under 10%. The district should be compact and contiguous. Minorities should be fairly represented so that minority vote is not diluted or it's not compacted or packed into a district. And the communities of interest should be looked at. Historical boundary lines should be considered, and taxing districts use the best efforts to include the boundary lines of the taxing districts as defined in the charter within a single council district where practicable, and follow the VRA and the CTVRA requirements. So having looked at the requirements, the census data, we looked at this PL 94-171 data that I talked about. And as per that data set, we have the total population and the voting age population for the city of Norwalk. So these are the racial and ethnic categories. So as per that data set, the city has a population of 91,184. And it has a voting age population of 72,682. And this data set provides us by race and ethnicity. So we have Hispanic, and then we have non-Hispanic versions of white, Black, American Indian, Alaskan Native, Asian, Pacific Islanders, others, and people who have reported of 2 or more races. So looking at this and looking at the graph, you can see that the Hispanic population is 30%. The non-Hispanic white population is 48%. Non-Hispanic Black population is 12%. And Asian is 5.23, and the others are of smaller percentages. Then the first thing that we did was, do we even have to redraw? Do the current districts comply with the requirements? So we looked at the current districts and the 2020 census data. And what you can see is that these are your districts, A, B, C, D, and E. And we are showing the little pies in there are showing you the racial and ethnic composition. And what you can see is that sometimes, the black lines are your current districts and the red lines are when we follow the census blocks. So now we looked at the current districts and we have color-coded them by the population in each district. So the red districts, red and pink, are the ones which have more population than the ideal population or the average population. So looking at this map, you can tell that District A has the most population and District C has the least population. D has more and B and E have less, but really A has the most and C has the least. So when we looked at the maximum deviation is 18.86%, which is more than the 10% that the norm is. So our goal was, then we knew right off the bat that we have to redraw the districts. And looking at this map, you knew that you have to take away from E and we have to give population to C. And then we also found that the current district boundaries are not aligned with the census blocks. So with this, we looked at what kinds of population are living in each of the districts. So we found that districts A and B are minority majority districts. And District B is a Hispanic majority district, and districts C, D, and E are non-Hispanic white majority districts. So that was by total population. And then we wanted to see what about the total voting age population. And we found that the percentages were a little bit lower, but the trend was the same. So A and B are majority minority districts, or rather minority majority districts, and C, D, and E are non-Hispanic white majority districts. So when we create the districts, we want to make sure that can we do exactly this situation or can we even do better? So as we started to meet with the reapportionment advisory committee, we showed them the data, the census data, just like I showed it to you. And then based on taking away from A and giving it to C, based on those data elements, we created 4 options for the RAC. Now, I do want to emphasize that while we have a lot of knowledge about census data, demographic data, we worked with the RAC to get their feedback, and also the registrars, both the Republican and the Democratic registrar, and we were able to come up with 4 options. In all the options, we use census blocks, and all the options followed the redistricting guidelines as per the city charter. And once we presented them, options 1, 2, and 3, then the RAC worked again, and they wanted us to come up with a hybrid option, which was option number 4. And then that was selected by the RAC to be presented to the city council. So with that, I'm going to show you the proposed changes in option 4. Now, if you look at the map, these are the 4 changes that were accepted by the RAC. Now, with these changes, we were able to bring the maximum deviation down from 18.86 to 3.75%. So the first change is we are taking away areas from A, District A, and assigning them to District C. And that is what we knew from the very beginning, because A is the most populated and C is the least, that we would have to do that. Now, the reason why we did this, because the committee felt that these areas of District A were felt closer to District C, and they were more like East Norwalk. So those were the recommendations by RAC, and we implemented them. The second change was a small change from A to E, and I'm going to show these changes in detail. And the third one was, and once again, these are recommendations from Stuart as well as Diana and all the other members of RAC. So this change was from E to D, and this one was from D to E. And then there were some other changes that we are going to show. So the proposed districts, and here is the statistics here. We have District A and B are minority majority districts. You can see the percentages here. And what you can also see is that non-Hispanic white population, we have in C, D, and E, they are in a clear majority. And then we looked at the voting age population. And when we look at voting age population, we see that these numbers fall a little bit, but still you can see that A and B are minority majority districts, and C, D, and E are non-Hispanic white majority districts. So now let's take a look at the changes. So these are the changes, and change number 1, and you can see that the taxing district line is shown in red, and it was agreed upon by the committee to take these areas and assign them to District C. So when we did that, this area has a population of 1,682 and a voting age population of 1,393. And 62% of the total population is non-Hispanic white. So now we move on to change number 2. This change number 2 is this block. And you can see the streets. We have given you the streets which border this area. And this has a population of 330 and a voting age population of 105. 35% of the population is non-Hispanic white. And there are no taxing district issues here. Now change number 3. Here from District E to District D. So this area, we found that this middle school is a polling place for District D, so it made sense to allocate this area to District D. And as you can see, it has a population of 351 and a voting age population of 293. 55% of the population is non-Hispanic white. Moving on to change number 4, and this area has a population of 285 and a voting age population of 241. 79% of the population is non-Hispanic white. So these are the 4 changes that we did, and some other changes that happened because of the blocks and census blocks and the current district boundaries. So this is where your current district boundaries are, but because the block boundary goes in here, so we had to take this area, and this area is automatically assigned to D. And this and this. So we have areas 5 and 6 from A to D, which worked out because A has to lose anyways. Now, other changes due to taxing districts and census blocks. There is this one whole block, and we put it in District B. And then this area, this whole block, we put it in District E. And these changes we made so that there would not be dwarf precincts. So with that, then there was one more change here from B to A because the block is that big. So, and the boundary goes here, the current district boundary. So this change was made. And with this, we tried to keep the changes to as minimum as possible and to follow the maximum deviation guidelines. We followed the census blocks. We followed the taxing districts as much as possible. And once again, I want to reiterate that this plan was developed with input from RAC, and we put it all together, and the RAC accepted it. And with that, I want to thank you, and I'm here for questions.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. I just want to quickly go to Steve and Brian. Are there any issues or any sort of considerations that were not covered in the presentation that people should know? I also just think it's good to make it clear these changes do not affect the election that's happening in like 10 days. So the November 5th election or early voting is not affected by any of this. So just putting that out first. Steve, Brian, is there anything you guys want to add before we take questions and anything from council members?
The only thing, thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may, Brian, is it all right if I go? Or
please go ahead, Steve.
all right. I think that the consultant laid everything out very well. And the point I want to make from a legal perspective is that this is really a constitutional process. This is not a local process. And the consultants have done this throughout the country. They've done it in other places in Connecticut as well. And the objective is to meet the standard that was established back in 1962. I won't go too deeply into the weeds on that. Under a Supreme Court case of Baker versus Carr, 1 person, 1 vote. And one of the earlier witnesses talked about trying to maintain historical districts that existed as far back as 1836. And there's been a lot of realignment over the years in terms of population in Norwalk, and the objective is to make sure that you have districts that reflect the concept of 1 person, 1 vote, that you're complying with the Voting Rights Act, Connecticut Voting Rights Act. And when we drafted the ordinance, we were very mindful of the taxing districts, and I think that it appears that the committee paid attention to those districts and tried to accommodate as much as they could without doing any dishonor to the constitutional standards that they have to follow in this process. One of the points I want to make is that if I think the taxing districts can probably be accommodated with shared polling places so that people from a taxing district could probably vote in a shared polling place. They will have separate council members, obviously, and members of the boards of education will be different, but the taxing districts are achieved for one purpose, and the voting districts that govern the council members and the Board of Ed are for general government purposes as well. And so I think that from a legal perspective, I believe that the committee did the right thing. I think they deliberated. They carefully considered the objections and concerns that were raised throughout the process. And I believe that the consultants did as well. So I think that everybody should be commended for the time they spent on this and for the balance that they tried to reach in this proposal that is currently before the council. I'd be happy to defer to Brian if he has any further comments.
Just want to say thank you to everyone over the last 10 to 11 months that got the ordinance through and then got this process through. So thank you to Steve for his guidance. Thank you to all the volunteers on the Reapportionment Advisory Committee who took this and dealt with it in a tight time frame and listened and did a lot of hard work and got it done in a timely fashion. So thank you to them. And thank you to the consultants for assisting them in getting this done. This was not easy, but it had to be done. And but there's still some work left to do in order to get this across the finish line, but we're pretty close. And I just wanted to acknowledge everyone who did this, who got this to where we are right now.
Okay, opening up the floor to any council members who want to make comments, have questions. Councilmember Ayers.
Good evening, all. I do want to give accolades and appreciation, as has already been stated, to the committee as well as the consultants and everybody that has done this work. Speak on behalf of my colleagues. We do not take your volunteerism for granted. As a representative of District A, is there any possible way, I've seen the maps, and we've had discussions, is there any possible way that we can get a list of the streets that are affected with the redistricting? That's my first question. Is that possible?
Yes.
So not in map form, in a list form, not in map form, but in a list form.
Yes, it is possible.
Okay,
We will
thank
provide
you.
it to you.
Thank you so much. My second question is, in the work that has been done, I've heard several people said that they took in consideration all of the recommendations that were levied or lifted by several different people. Is the choice of Plan 4, I think you said, is that just the better plan? Was it not unanimously agreed on by the committee? What stuck out Plan 4 from the other plans that were looked at?
I can take the question, but would Ken like to speak to it?
I can speak to that. Nicole, each one of the options developed. We saw option 1. There was comments from the registrar on things that we need to consider. So we came up with option 2. And the same results as far as option 3. We discussed what issues were, and we had option 3. And then the Republican registrar pointed out a few situations as far as concerns along East Avenue. And so we came up with an option 4, and as Preeti indicated, it was a hybrid. And that was what we felt was the best way to move forward. Did I cover that, Preeti?
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I knew it, but I just wanted to physically go on the record hearing that. Thank you so much,
That's
Ken.
fine. And Diana Pomadero, Christopher, she may have comments here. I don't know, but she, anyway.
And my other question is, I have some more, but I'll let my colleagues speak. I don't want to hog the meeting. My other question is, was there any, how can I frame it? Other than opening up to public participation, and we know how that is, was there any other distinction or any other concerns lifted other than the people we have heard from this evening? Any other areas in the city that people have shown or stated their concerns in the redistricting?
We within the public participation in each one of our meetings, which I think we had like 8 of them, we allowed anybody that wanted to speak, and you heard the majority of them this evening.
Hey, Ken, just one thing to add.
Hi, Scott.
Hey, one thing Miss Harris had asked earlier, was it unanimous? And it was not unanimous. There was one member that abstained, I believe, before we submitted to the committee, because there were because of the concerns that Miss Obachowski had raised. And based on that, she wanted to make sure that it got a proper voice, a proper public hearing like you're giving it here. So that was the one. I don't know, Ken, if it was officially an abstention or a vote against, but that was the one nay or neutral.
Councilmember Freyer.
Thank you, Mr. Goldstein. We've heard on a couple of instances that there was some costs involved with this, and some of the alternatives were going to be costing more, costing less. Could you address any of those? Is cost a factor in any of this?
I think the best person to answer would be Diana or Stuart Wells.
Okay.
And what happens is, after the districts are done, some administrative costs are involved, and basically precincts, the city will have to do something, but it's a part of the process.
It's a normal process that happens after redistricting. There will be some administrative changes that need to be made to precincts to manage the changes in the districts. That's pretty normal.
Diana Palladino, Christopher. So obviously I'll let Stuart also speak, because certainly he has the expertise in this. But for me, the benefits of the balanced representation with the following the protocol, one person, one vote, seem to outweigh the costs of managing the split precincts. And the expenses, in my opinion, based on what I shared with the group from research that we were able to obtain, are minimal and manageable with split precincts. And that's often done in these situations. So you can be cost efficient in terms of shared resources. I did share the financial data from the Registrar of Voters office pertaining to the cost of the elections. So certainly that can, you know, be something that's shared as well.
My position is well known on this. I think it's a terrible idea to to make tiny precincts. I don't think it's legally required. I completely disagreed. My position has been well stated. I said it at the council before. It's more, there are costs, but the primary thing is it's almost impossible to get anybody that wants to work at a precinct with less than 100 people being served. We have a very hard time now with the smallest one we have, which is 5 times or more as large as what this one is. They don't like doing it because most people don't work for minimum wage. They work for a bit of money and civic duty and civic sort of pride and contribution they make as poll workers. And to ask them to go up there, it's like to have these primaries like we had this year where nobody voted. Nobody wants to sit there for 14 hours and do nothing. So I think that's bad. As to how you cut up District A, I'm agnostic on that. I showed you a way you can do it without cutting up the taxing district, but it does require moving other pieces around.
And Stuart, it doesn't follow the census blocks, which was one of the
Correct, and I don't
guidance,
see why
right?
you have to. I
Okay.
found no legal, and no one has persuaded me anything about that yet, or shown me any legal authority that says you have to. We've made it for 120 years without doing anything like that.
Well, luckily we have a
that's the
couple of
point.
attorneys on the phone, so.
You made it for 120 years violating the federal constitutional standard.
That's
Stuart.
well, I don't know about that for all that time, but one man, one vote, it doesn't depend. on census
1962,
blocks.
1962. So that's not an argument. And the
Steve,
census tract.
With respect, unless you did the numbers with the old lines, you wouldn't know whether you were one man, one vote off or not. I don't know that anybody has, I've never seen statistics from 1952 forward on that. I do know that in 2000, the Knopp administration looked into it and thought that they were within these lines. You know, Ed and Alex are both attorneys, and they're certainly aware of these kinds of things. I have no reason to, I've yet again never seen any legal authority for why you have to follow the census block lines. The line you have, instead of making these tiny little precincts, cutting up pieces of B to fit them in properly, I don't see it. But you know, you got some authority, show me. But other than that, that's my take on it.
I just want to say that for the record, that even now you have tiny precincts,
Not this small.
but you have quite a few of those.
And you have the taxing district.
No, we don't.
All right,
have the-
wait. So
What's tiny about the precincts we have now? The A4 is about 500 people. Some of these you've just created with this plan are 50. And then every other one is pretty decently sized. Therefore, it can be administered efficiently.
Stuart, if I recall, I believe you had said this would require 2 additional polling places? Is it 3?
I don't know. I haven't seen it, but at least 2.
Okay.
I think. The one, the people on along Ely Avenue there up to, I forget the name of the street, and will be voting in Rowayton instead of where they were before. And the ones on is it Lawrence that's up in that corner that along the street that FedEx and those places are. And that census block runs all the way down to Dock Road. And if you leave it in E, then they've got to have a separate ballot and vote, you know, and not in South Norwalk anymore. Tiny numbers to be sure. South Norwalk won't miss them, I suppose, but it's administratively very difficult. You can leave the lines alone. It wouldn't change your ethnicity. It doesn't change your numbers in terms of one man, one vote at all.
But I think going back a step going back to Mr. Frere's question, anything we do here has administrative costs associated with it. I mean, you're hearing the pros and cons, but it all relates to creating these dwarf precincts, as Stuart said.
That's the only part of it I care about, frankly. I mean, the rest of it is like we can do.
Yeah, we still live in Norwalk, so.
Yeah,
When we talk about, just not to beat a dead horse here, but you know, you talk about the expense. Are you talking about one person, two extra people, four extra people? How many extra people?
usually minimum precinct is 5. And then that's 2 of them. And yeah, we can do them in the same room as some others, but it's equipment. It's transportation of the equipment. It's different ballots. It's more
So you don't
hiring
you're
time.
Okay, so it sounds like it's more administrative. I mean, physically, you don't need additional people for these as we call them.
Well, there wouldn't be any. There's no buildings within the precinct, the tiny precincts themselves, that would be suitable for a polling place. I don't
Okay.
believe. So you'd have to double them up with something else. But now they have to have a separate line, separate equipment, separate tabulators, separate transportation, and so forth. The tabulators are free from the state, but each year you're paying maintenance on them. When you have more of them, you need 2 per precinct. You've got ballots that are more expensive when you have to have a different one for different people. And, you know, I believe there's some other areas where, although nobody lives there now, so there wouldn't be those same costs. Somebody could in the future. One of them is, let's say, Lockwood Matthews Park, which I believe is being split up. No one lives in the mansion at the moment, but a caretaker conceivably could be hired to do that if they were a citizen and they wanted to vote. They'd have a 1-person precinct.
The bottom line, though, is that I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
The bottom line is we're not talking about an extraordinary expense.
Yeah, and that's
No, it's not. It's
Okay.
Of course they're not tiny precincts or the upfront costs and then the annual cost of servicing them for primary and for a general election.
Okay.
And all that. Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
I think for me, the thing that stands out the most is the core mission of the committee. And it just seems like with an 18 point, I think it was 86% deviation within District A and C, it's far exceeding the acceptable limits. And if for some reason I'm incorrect in the legalities of this, it seems that we're not meeting the national standard. And we need to use these census blocks. They're widely accepted and they ensure the fairness and representation. And I think for me, that's the biggest driving factor here. And I find it important to consider that. I also think neighborhood continuity, is a big factor as well. Something that perhaps made sense 60 years ago may not make sense today. And I think it's important that we really, look at the goal and, look at something, a representative in the Spring Hill area, probably has a very different experience door knocking than a representative in East Norwalk. While the issues can be similar, I think that the concerns with traffic and infrastructure and growth, differ. And that's why I think that neighborhood continuity is important to address for today, not what it was, or, I think we really need to look at the future. And I also think compliance is a big thing. Now, if what Stuart's saying that, we truly don't need to be compliant and that's not the case, then that's a different story. But from everything I've understood, we've gotten away with something for a very long time and it's time to make things right and, follow a legal mandate.
I didn't say anything about it not being compliant with the one man, one vote at all. I only said you don't have to chop up the lines we now have, just to follow the census block in these areas where we have taxing districts. Those are political boundaries, whereas the census blocks are administrative lines on maps. We could have, if we know about this, talk to the Census Bureau and have them cut their lines differently. They're perfectly willing to do that. It's just midterm now,
Okay,
and their lines change somewhat every census.
okay, I want to circle this back, Councilmember Najelski-Eichner.
Sorry, I was waiting because I wanted to make sure that all of the members of the committee had spoken first. So is there anyone else who wants to speak since I'm not actually on this committee? Okay. And I think actually the point that Stuart just ended on is sort of maybe where I want to begin, which is to say that I think that this process has surfaced remnants of old things that need to get cleaned up, right? I think this has been a theme that we as this council, the council last 2 years have really been pushing and working on. It is time to clean up old messes that have lingered and have not been dealt with. Because they create really unnecessary problems, right? This is not in 2024. We are not the city we were in 1913. And I think that, you know, I want to express my enormous gratitude for the work of this commission, for the work of these consultants. They have come up with a solution that is legal, that puts us in compliance with the Constitution, with the Voting Rights Act, that makes sure that we, with our ordinance, with state law, these are incredibly important things. This is the fundamental right to vote. There's no sense in making and sort of risking anything with that. And although census blocks may not be required, it is extremely clear from our consultants who do this everywhere, from everything that I have read, this is how you do this, and this is how you defend it in court. We are incredibly lucky that we have not been sued, right? We have been non-compliant with this potentially for as much as 5 to 6 decades, right? We certainly have been non-compliant with it for at least the last 10 to 20 years. So given if we were to have to defend this in court, the way that people do this is by census blocks. That is just the way this has been done. Even if it is not legally required, that is how we would defend ourselves. So it is important that we stick with the way that we can make sure we're showing that we are doing the right thing. That said, I hear solutions for the next census, which is one, I don't understand why the taxing district has not asked the state to revisit its lines. Lines that were drawn in 1913 when roads did not exist are useless. We as a city cannot change it. The taxing districts are a creature of state law. There is, to the best of my knowledge, absolutely nothing that prevents the taxing district from asking that its lines be drawn to conform with roads that exist in 2024, and that we could then do so to conform also to census blocks. This is a solvable problem as far as I can tell, and it rests with the first taxing district to get lines that function for 2024. Second, as Stuart just mentioned, I do think that it behooves the city to think about this problem before the next census and work as we can, as necessary and as possible with the Census Bureau to make sure that our lines for the census blocks also line up with logical lines for the city. So I think this has been a really important exercise in figuring out that we are hanging on to old stuff that is not helping us. We hopefully will be in a place, now that we've worked through this, that in 2028, let's say, we should be thinking and preparing for this to get ready for 2030 so that we can do this in a way that is going to give us the best possible outcome to make the most sense for the most people as cleanly as possible. And I really hope that between now and then, the first taxing district takes this opportunity to get themselves lined up with 2024 roads. And then we can actually have a functional conversation about all of this. But again, the city cannot do that. We can suggest, we can't push. For this ordinance, for this task, our responsibility as the council is to do things in the way that is going to best protect people's constitutional rights. And I take very seriously that our committee members are reapportionment advisory notes looked at this and spent enormous time looking at this, and their conclusion that this is the best way we can protect our residents' rights. I think that's the way to do it. So I really appreciate the all of this conversation. I really appreciate Stuart in particular for surfacing all these concerns. I think it has helped us start to have a conversation that is long overdue about the ways in which the taxing districts and the city boundary lines don't line up and have not lined up for a long time. And we should think about what we can do to clean all that up. But I think in the meantime, we cannot be at risk of not representing people's rights appropriately while we wait to sort of sort those problems out. So thank you all again. But I am very comfortable with the decision that the commission has come to recommend.
Thank you, Councilmember Najelski-Eichner. I saw Councilmember Ayers' hand up, and then Stuart.
I will yield to Mr. Wells. I think he wants to address my colleague's comment.
Okay. First, I agree with Nora completely on the fact that we need to clean up the taxing district lines. All of the taxing district lines do not follow streets. It makes it impossible to put houses correctly in the right districts. The line runs through the middle of the house in many cases, or through apartment buildings and all over the place. We can't even, there's nothing we can do to help that from where we are sitting. You're not going to give me the budget to have a survey to see which side of the line the bedroom is in these houses, which would be the only way we could get the people in the correct one. Some of it has to do with addresses. There are buildings with 2 or 3 buildings in the same complex, some on one side, excuse me, some on the other. They have the same street address, so they have to be in the same district. All these problems could be cleaned up, but only by the legislature, as far as I know. It's about my pay grade anyway.
No, I think the taxing districts would have to request it of the legislature. I think that is the only route.
Sure, because then none of this would exist as a problem. You can follow the streets. That's what the legislature does every year, but that's because the census follows the streets mostly. Not always. Sometimes waterways. We could just dig a ditch along where some of these lines are, and they can follow it. I mean, we'll run a hose in it when they come by to create their districts.
To be honest, I like the bedroom idea where a person on the left side votes in one district, one precinct, and the person on the right side votes in a different one. I think that's
when they're the same house on the same street. Obviously, you always have that on an opposite side of the street. Of course, that gets confusing too, because we don't put odd and even numbers on the sides that you normally would all over the place. And don't even ask me about halves and A, B, and C in the back and out of order numbering and all that.
Well, in an effort to keep the discussion going, I won't. Councilmember Ayers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I need to just raise a comment that was brought forth in public participation, and I think, Mr. Minnick, you would be the one to answer it, but I'm not 100% sure. It was brought up about keeping intact historical parts of Norwalk. Please walk me through this, help me process this. Does a polling, and I probably know the answers, but I need to walk through this. Does a polling district or where a person has to poll determine the historical location of where their property is?
No, the historical standards or the historical areas or districts, and they could change over time. Somebody referenced 1836. I do not know the history of Norwalk, the town and the city of Norwalk back to 1836, but I'm sure that over the course of time throughout history, what somebody considered to be a neighborhood or a district has changed, shifted, modified over the course of time. It has nothing to do with the polling places. And so I think that's the short answer. The other thing I wanted, if I may, Councilwoman Ayers, point out that, you know, public law 94-171 dealing with census and redistricting, married redistricting to the census for the purposes of achieving one person, one vote, to try to answer the registrar of voters issue later that he raised before. And the census is the most reliable data that we have. The census is not perfect. I think everybody has said that. And I would say that sometime later in this decade, to the majority leader's point, is somebody should be talking to Congressman Hymes's office to figure out how the city of Norwalk could better its position, modify the districts in any way that it can. But I think it's generally conceived by Congress, starting in the 1990s, that marrying the census to redistricting was a fairly reliable way to depoliticize the creation of the districts to the maximum extent possible within the context of that law and the other federal laws that are designed to achieve the constitutional standard. So the concept of a historic district, while you want to, and the standards that are followed by our consultants, and I'll stand corrected if I'm wrong on this, is to try to consider communities of interest. But it doesn't mean that the community of interest governs. So the greatest extent you can accommodate those communities of interest, you should. And I believe that this committee sounds like it did, based on the comments that we have. But it's not going to be perfect, and not everybody's going to be happy, as we have seen. But the census districts are used for a reason. And I think that now that you're into this process, which I don't think the city has been in, I think you have to develop customs and ways of dealing with it to try to better your position or modify your position at the end of this decade, the beginning of the next decade, when you go through redistricting once more.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Just a follow-up question to that, if you don't mind. Can you give some insight, if at all possible, of what are our neighboring municipalities doing? Are they following the census lines, or are they using some other metrics?
I don't know specifically, but the towns that I do know, the cities I do know, have followed census districts. In fact, one of the points I was going to bring up, if the chair doesn't mind, I'll bring it up right now, is that we're going to have to create an ordinance and to go before the ordinance committee. If you approve this tonight, move this forward to the full council meeting in November, we need to do an ordinance. As I was preparing a draft ordinance, I found that the city of New Haven defines their districts not by meets and bounds or streets, but by census tracts, because the census tracts comprise and create the district. So that's a new language, new linguistics for these kinds of things. I've asked the consultants to provide us with meets and bounds. I know you've asked for streets. And so the ordinance will list the meets and bounds. I'm sure that they'll also be able to provide you with the census tracts. So the communities that I'm aware of use the census tract because it's the most reliable information. Most of the municipalities use consulting firms like the consulting firm that we're using, and I believe that that is really the professional standard. They can correct me again if I'm wrong. That really is the professional standard that is utilized by the consulting firms that do this work around the country.
Thank you, Attorney Mendick. And I just want to just sort of close, unless there's anyone else who wants to make a comment, not only to commend the people on the Reapportionment Advisory Committee have really delved into the issues, as well as ArcBridge. I also want to make sure that we get a little perspective, because if I'm not mistaken, someone tell me if I'm wrong, there are about approximately 3,000 people who will be affected by this in a city with a registered voter population of something in the neighborhood of 50 to 55,000. Is that right?
That is
It is
correct.
55,000.
I'm sorry.
I think it's a little less
How many
than
people
that.
will be, how many people will be affected by the proposed changes? That's the number I'm asking for.
It should be somewhere around 3,000. I can provide the
Okay.
exact number.
And assuming this passes, I would hope, and I don't know if there's a plan or the registrars have discussed this, about making sure that those people are informed if their precincts change or where to go and where they're gonna vote. But I just wanna acknowledge that by shifting and essentially figuring out ways to make sure that we are in compliance, there is not, sea changes of voters who are going from one district to another, and, residents for that matter. So I just wanted to make sure that got across, and I also wanted to thank the registrars, Stuart Wells and Diane Palladino Christopher, Brian Smith, Brian Cadillas, Steve Mednick, all the members of the Reapportionment Advisory Committee. I think Brenda Penn Williams is here. I saw she joined the meeting during the middle of the discussion. And ArcBridge. Are there any other comments anyone wants to make before I ask for a motion? Okay. Does anyone want to make a motion?
I'm sorry, Mr. Goldstein. I just want to say, we've all said our thank yous, but I really want to say thank you for having this meeting for clarification for all of us. You answered our questions. This wasn't easy, but you all put in the work, and I'm so appreciative of that. And I think, as Josh mentioned, going forward, it's going to be how we communicate this to the residents. That's going to be important as well. But rest assured, there's more to come as the city is growing and our lines will be changing. And I think the best thing that we can do now is to set up a plan, as Ms. Nora Niljelski-Eichner had said, to really talk to our folks in Hartford and our representatives in Washington. How do we move forward in a more progressive way, right? Because we can't continue to do things this way. But I think we need to talk. We need to have that conversation. Don't know how that will happen, but I think that's something we need to plan for. And again, thank you to everybody. It's been said already. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I will turn it back over to you, Josh.
Thank you, Darlene. Okay, so the motion that would be made here would be to take, and Steve, you can tell me if I say this wrong, take the plan proposed by the Reapportionment Advisory Committee to the Common Council for a public hearing to occur on November 12th. Or actually, is it first to the Ordinance Committee?
Ordinance.
Ordinance. I think it's ordinance who goes first. So that passes out of here with, as Steve mentioned, that there would be, since this needs to happen by ordinance, there would be passed to a special meeting of the Ordinance Committee, which would take place early next week.
And Josh, just for clarification real quick on the public hearing, at the special meeting of the Ordinance Committee, there'll be an ordinance that has to be sent to public hearing, which will be again at the Common Council meeting on November 12th. And the legal notice of public hearing will be placed in the paper, and that legal notice will have the proposed ordinance. And on top of that, before you get to the ordinance, will be a link to all the documents that are attached to the agenda here, including the proposed plan, including the letter from the Reapportionment Advisory Committee. So that link will be accessible so people can access those documents as well as the ordinance from the newspaper, and they can see the link as well. That will all be on the public notice.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate the clarification because I knew I
was Mr. Chair, point of clarity, if I may.
Sure.
We're moving it to the ordinance for public comment on the ordinance, or public comment on the plan that is submitted tonight?
My understanding is there is a ordinance that is the legal vehicle to approve this plan.
Okay, thank you for the clarity.
So that's because of the way the committee was set up, that since it is by ordinance, by passing the ordinance, you are passing the plan.
Okay, thank you for the clarity.
Okay, I also want to acknowledge Kia Gibbs is here. I just wanted to make sure I said that before, to thank her for her service. Anyone want to make a motion? Councilmember Fryer.
I'd like to make that motion.
Okay, so with that, all in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Wait, those are council members. Sorry.
Committee members.
Yes, committee members. So that was any opposed? Abstentions? Passes unanimously. All right, thank you everyone for your work, and there will be a special meeting of the ordinance committee to be announced at a date to be determined, but I think it's probably going to be, I think what, Brian, either next Tuesday or Wednesday.
Next Tuesday or Wednesday.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay.
1,000 early votes today. 1,000.
That's awesome.
All-time
Good night.
high.
So cool.
Don't
Don't
Just saying.
All
we
right.
have another agenda item?
We have a lot of agenda items.
I was about to say, people, okay, thank you.
All right. So as you can see on the agenda, we're just going to go in order. We're going to start with the fire department. I see. Okay. Assistant Chief Ed McCabe is here and Deputy Chief Joseph Coppola. All right. So we're going to just go in order. So fire department, the first item, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute the multi-municipality interlocal agreement entitled Amended and Restated Interlocal Agreement, Fairfield County Hazardous Incident Response Team. Do I have a motion? Councilmember Freyer. Who would like to speak to this item?
Deputy Chief Coppola is going to speak to this item. He's our hazmat chief, and he can explain.
Great. All right, Deputy Chief Coppola, floor is yours. You're on mute.
All right, sorry about that. I was just getting my video ready. So it was the proposal on the meter package, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, we're looking to replace our existing gas detection meters, which are on all the apparatus. They are older. We've been experiencing some problems with them and needing repair. And I researched an option that is it's a program that will allow us to replace the meters on a subscription. It's almost like a lease program for 4 years. We pay monthly. The pricing is in the proposal. I do have it if anyone has any questions on it. And it will one of the advantages to this this program is the meters, in the event that there's a problem with them, they're going to have addressable docking stations that charge them and send messages back to the the vendor if there's any repairs that are needed, and then they will be we will get a replacement overnight for that meter, and that's a huge help because when these meters go down, we have a spare or two, but you know, when we need to send extra apparatus to a call if one of the meters is out. So having this equipment and having a replacement replacement program in place like this is a huge benefit to us. Also, the meters that we're looking at, the 4 gas meters, are very common in the region. Several other municipalities in our region have the same meter package, and that allows us to be able to be interoperable with those other agencies when we work with them, which is very common. I think that's about the best I can do in summing it up. Is there any questions on it?
I'm gonna do Councilmember Freyer can ask the question that I think I'm about to ask.
Okay.
Yeah, who owns these meters? Because I
So-
saw something in the reason I ask is that it said that after the 48 months that we've paid $38,000, then we have to purchase the meter?
No, we own them after that. That's in the package. We will own them after it. However, we're going to have to come up with a way to, at the end of it, we'll have to come up with a way to maintain them. We could renew it, or we could just maintain them as we're maintaining our meters now, which is basically through a budget that when one breaks, we get it repaired and we get a bill for it. So we
So
will
we
own
don't-
them. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead, continue.
No, so what, at the end of the 4-year term, we own the equipment. We don't have to give anything back. We
But
could,
there's a line on the last line of the contract says that we then have to buy the meter, I believe. Then we have to pay for it. I agree. When I first read the whole thing, I agree with what you're saying, but then that last line said, and I don't have I had thought I had copied it out, but it's in the package.
yeah, I'm looking at it right now.
And it says something to the effect that then we have to acquire the meter, something along those lines. And
So
then
the
the
first
other thing
one-
is, the other thing was that is if the meter's not ours, or the meter is ours today, why would we have to buy new ones? I'm not.
So what I'm looking at, I'm looking at my price quote. It's the quote at the end of the my procurement justification form. The first line on it says, customer will own like equipment and quantities of equipment below at end of agreement. Customer will purchase all equipment up front for duration of agreement and will not be charged. It will be charged monthly for iNet service to cover equipment. So it says right there in the first line that we will own like equipment and quantities of equipment below at the end of agreement. I'm looking at it right now. It says it's the first line under iNet exchange order form.
This was
So
on the last. This was in the last line, and I apologize, I don't have it in front of me. But it was on the last line of that that contract, I believe. It was all by itself. So, but nevertheless, it sounded like it must have been a mistake.
Well, it says,
And
I'm looking at
Go
the
ahead.
last page right now. It says customer owned equipment, customer has or will purchase the equipment listed above prior to start of the program. Customer will own that equipment or like equipment at the end of the term. Monthly usage fees cover repair, replacement of customer owned hardware listed above, replacement parts, labor, shipping and handling, training, and access to the iNet control platform and self-installation. So I'm not really exactly sure. I'm looking at the contract and that's what I'm reading. So, I mean, if I'm looking at the wrong thing, I apologize.
But so it sounds like you're saying that we own these today. I mean, this is just going to be kind of a maintenance contract that we're going to have.
Well, the way they're, I mean, that seems like semantics. I mean, at the end of, we're going to get the equipment. We're going to be paying a subscription fee, which is that $793.95 a month for 48 months.
Right.
And then at the end of that term, we own the equipment. So it is almost.
And why isn't this just like an installment contract? Shouldn't this be a capital item?
I'm not really sure. This is how I was kind of instructed to put it together. I did, if you look at the package, I did all of the things that I was supposed to do.
No,
I did-
I'm not criticizing you. It's just, it seems like.
I'm sorry. I want to make sure we didn't skip a step here. Because we've been spending a lot of time talking about the meters, which I'm pretty sure is the second item, but we haven't talked about the cooperative agreement, which is the first item.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, so let's take
The
a beat.
cooperative agreement is the one with all the other.
Exactly. And
municipalities.
that's what's actually on the table at the moment. So let's take a breather here. Does anyone have questions about the first item? Because that's what Jim made the motion for. So let's do this first. Because if no one has questions about the first item, let's take that to a vote. All in favor? Okay. That's everybody. Item 1 passes. Now let's go back to the meters for a second.
Okay, so I'm sorry, pardon me, but what did we just vote? What did you guys just vote on? The interlocal agreement?
Yes, the interlocal agreement, which is
Okay.
not, I believe the discussion that you and Jim have been having has been on the second item, which is the 4-year agreement for the iNet exchange program with the Industrial Scientific Cooperation, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
All right, so let me do a little parliamentary procedure, and I'm just going to read the item in, and then we're going to rediscuss this. Authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to sign a 4-year agreement for the INET exchange program with Industrial Scientific Corporation for replacement of gas detection equipment meters for all apparatus citywide. The subscription program will allow us to own the equipment once the 48-month term is concluded. We will be billed monthly in the amount of $793.95 by Industrial Scientific Corporation for a total 4-year term, cost not to exceed $38,109.60 from the account number noted. Does anyone have a motion to move this item? All right. Councilmember Dunn. Okay, I think we need to sort of backtrack here. Has this agreement, the INET exchange agreement, is this a re-up of a previously done agreement, or is this a whole new agreement?
It's a whole new agreement.
Okay.
We currently have a company, we currently have a meter. It's called a RAE Systems, RAE. We have 4 gas meters on all apparatus. We've had them for a long time. I've been handling a lot of the maintenance and repair on them, and we've been having a lot of problems with them. We have a lot of complaints from the company officers. And when I got into my my new role as a training director and safety officer, and liaison with hazmat, I looked into some other options to kind of make the process a little smoother. And through my research with different cities in the region who use this product and this program, they're extremely happy with it. They have good experience, and I decided that, being that there are a lot of the agencies in the region that have it, and also the Fairfield County Hazmat team has this technology, it kind of makes it a little bit more universal and a little more consistent across the board. With the replacement of a meter overnight, workday type thing, makes life a lot easier for us because we won't have downtime. We won't have companies that have to get assisted by other companies to meter a home for carbon monoxide and other things like that. So that's why I decided that this was probably one of the better, not probably, the better option than what we were using.
And it seems to be standard across, and when you say other municipalities, you're talking about local Fairfield County municipalities, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And just looking, I mean, this went through purchasing. I assume this was reviewed by council. I see in purchasing, it seems to be very clear that the hardware will be owned once the 48-month term is over, after paying them, I'm going to round up, $800 monthly fee.
Mhm.
Is there, Jim, I'm not sure.
So my question, I'm trying to look it up here, but the question was that at the end of the contract that we're to sign, there was wording in there that you will then be responsible to buy this thing.
But
and
I
hang
think-
on.
At
the end
of a pay number.
Hang on. And so my question was, did we own these things already?
No,
Do we,
no, we don't have, this is a new purchase. We have a completely different metering technology on board all our apparatus right now. This is a
So
new.
these are these are new. This is the $800 a month is to monitor those that equipment, correct?
It's for the cost of using it, for
Okay.
for the reach back to the company.
Well, but if it's the cost of using it, it's ours. So this is some kind of a maintenance agreement, right?
You could look at it that way, I suppose.
It's not
Yeah.
just, well, it's a maintenance agreement that converts into an acquisition. Right?
And there's no other additional cost for this at the end of
No.
the thing.
There's no
Doesn't
other
seem-
cost. No. There's no other cost.
So
I
it
looked-
looks like an installment contract.
Well, I don't know what the price of I'm not sure it says what like if you were to just buy the meter today,
How
does
much
it
would it be?
installment? I'm assuming not. But also, iNet seems to be the sole provider of these specific type of meters, right? Like they own the market here, correct?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, that's why I did a sole source on it, because there is no other company that provides this service with these
And they
meters.
seem to confirm that in writing to you, and that's in the packet here.
That's correct. I did include that, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
But
that's
at
what
the
I
end of the
received.
day, at the end of 4 years, then we own it.
Yes. Yes, that's correct. That's what I'm, what's in black and white on what I'm looking at in my price quote and contract, not contract, but price quote. Says it. I just lost it. Sorry.
This has gone through purchasing.
Yeah, I got approved from purchasing. And also, it also went through IT because these, the docking stations that not only charge the meters, but also send messages back to the company, they're addressable, so that there's IT infrastructure involved in that, and I had to make sure that I got approval from IT, that their posture was acceptable to the city of Norwalk, which it was deemed to be.
Okay.
I can't find it.
All right. Well, why don't we do this? I mean, and I agree, there's a whole litany of, I mean, with the data storage with Amazon Web Services, that's also in the backup too. Just one quick question. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Dunn had her hand up.
The question, so after 4 years, then we have to enter into a maintenance agreement separately? Is that what I'm understanding?
So we could, or we could do what we're doing now and just budget money to repair the meters as needed. You see what I mean? So that would probably not be the best thing to do, but I mean, I do think that over, you know, over the period of 4 years, you know, the technology may get better and change, and we might want to do something different at that time anyway. Does that make sense?
So, no, because I was just, yeah, but I'm just, not that I'm negating it, I'm just thinking, so then you actually have the ability to have a separate maintenance contract versus purchase with maintenance. There are options for other people that already have them, I guess.
Yeah, you could, you could continue it.
We're not gonna have to buy 4 years with the maintenance contract all over again, because they do offer it separately.
Right. Well, no, we're not gonna, I mean, no, I'm not looking to, I mean, what the meters we have right now are probably going on, I don't know, I want to say they're probably more than 5 years. I mean, we replace sensors and things like that in them all the time.
But we don't own these meters today.
Well, I'm not sure I know what you mean. We don't own.
It says here in the last paragraph here, it says, this subscription service for gas meters called iNet, it is a program that will allow us to own the hardware once the 48-month term is over.
Right.
We will build for those at $800 a month for the equipment for a total cost of $38,000. So that means that you're saying that we will own them after the 48 months is over. So
Correct.
we don't own these things now. So this looks like we're buying for.
Unless, Jim, we're currently in a contract that includes owning at the end of it.
No,
No. This is an installment agreement where there is a provision in the agreement where it converts to ownership after 4 years. That's the deal. That's what it is. So we own the meter in 4 years, but we subscribe.
We don't own it until 48 months is up and we paid $800 a month.
Yes.
And if we were to buy this outright, it would be a capital expenditure.
And it would be probably way more than this.
It would be a lot more than that. Yeah, I don't have the number. I'm sorry, I don't have the price with me, but I
No,
know.
that's okay. And it was approved by purchasing, it was approved by IT. Assuming this goes through, Deputy Chief, what's the timeline on when we'd be able to get these meters and when they'd be operational?
Well, so I asked the vendor to extend out the quote because this has been dragging on for a while, and not to my fault, but I had to go through several different things like IT and purchasing to get these things. I have been told that the price is still good. Now, it says 60 days. It was extended. It was extended out till the end of October. So most likely, once I get the equipment, I have to provide some training for my people for it. You know, not a lot because it's very similar to what we're using, but it's still different. So there's going to be a training element to that, which could be a few weeks. So I would say, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's okay. So realistically, from the time I get the equipment, which could be once I get the purchase order, get to the vendor, I would say I could probably get it within, think about probably 2 to 3 weeks, and then another 2 weeks or 3 weeks for training on it.
The only thing I would say though, before, just because of what you said just a moment ago, obviously we don't have a council meeting, not next week, but the week after, which would be after October. So I just hope that you can get insurance from INET that there isn't some spike in the price, so that if we do pass this at the contract stated value here, that we don't find out when we pass it that it actually costs more than what we passed it for.
Yeah, I understand.
So I think if you can just get some sort of assurance from them that they will maintain, you know, that you'll lock in the quote so long as it gets passed, you know, at our next meeting.
I understand. Yeah, I will.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions on this item here?
This is a budgeted item already? It's in the budget?
Yes, it is. It is. And I budgeted it, so their money is there. And it's still there, but one of the issues I've been having is because of the time delay, I'm still using some money to maintain the meters we currently have, because they have to, obviously we still need to have those in service with our companies. So far, so good. It hasn't been to the point where I'm dipping into the money that I would have set aside for this program, but I do want to get it done so I don't have to worry about that anymore.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, because there's that budget, that line item budget is for meters and maintenance of meters. So we haven't bought anything new. We're just maintaining what we have.
Right. And
Okay.
Chief, I think there's a good point to be made there in that, you know, there's money already spent on the current meter package within the department to maintain those meters, to replace sensors, to recalibrate. And what we're doing here is outsourcing the maintenance on those, which is going to allow less downtime on the meters. Because now if Chief Capola has a meter that's down, he needs to send it out for repair. It needs to go out to the manufacturer. It takes time to come back, and that company is without the meter. This subscription will eliminate that downtime, and will eliminate that process, and will streamline it. And meters are something that are used every single day, you know, by the companies to you know, to detect hazardous environments and hazardous gases. So I think in overall, this is going to be a good thing for the department, and that's going to keep us up and running for not a lot more money,
Right.
but we're going to have our meters in service.
And that's a huge value add, and I really appreciate that synopsis, because I think that you made the argument, you know, as to.
I'm not arguing about, I'm not questioning the need for it or anything like that at all. It's just, it appeared the way it was written that we would have to buy this at the end of that period.
No, I think
Are
completion of
really
the,
buying it
completion of the
over a
installment
period of-
contract constitutes purchase.
And it should be a capital item as opposed to an operating item. But it's in the budget. Let's not go there.
Right. Okay. All in favor? Okay, passes unanimously. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Next item. Authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute a contract with Delta Level Defense for a total not to exceed $26,684.22 for the purchase of 19 sets of tactical body armor. Munis account noted. Do I have a motion? Councilmember Dunn. Ed, are you speaking to this one?
Yes. So this is the second of two purchases. We made the first purchase last year. We split the purchase in half. We did half the department last year. This would be the second set to round out that purchase, which provides tactical body armor for the firefighters when we are operating at incidents with Norwalk Police. Basically any mass casualty incident or any incident with an active threat. The firefighters come in to back up the Norwalk Police Department with treating casualties, et cetera. So this is to get our body armor up to code and to update the current sets that we have.
Does anyone have any questions, comments about this item? Seeing none, I will entertain a vote. All in favor? Okay, passes unanimously. Item 4, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute a contract with MES Shipman's Fire Equipment for a total not to exceed $279,000, $279,591.25 for new fire department SCBA air bottles compliant with the latest NFPA standard. Munis account noted. Do I have a motion? Someone, please. Councilmember Dunn. Deputy Chief Capola, Assistant Chief McCabe, who is speaking to this item?
I can speak to it. So this is part of our mandated upgrade of our self-contained breathing apparatus for the firefighters. As noted in the packet, the SCBA is several components to it. One of the major components obviously being the bottle that stores the air, and that's what we're buying here to get up to the latest NFPA standards and to come into compliance with those.
Do any council members have any questions, concerns, comments about this item? Seeing none, I will call for a vote. All in favor? Okay, that passes. All right, Team Fire Department, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night.
Thank
You
you.
too.
Good night.
All right, it's time for the police. I know you guys have been waiting for a while, so Melissa, good to see you.
Good
All
evening.
right, let's dive right in. Number 1, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute any and all documents and agreements necessary to accept grant funding under the Connecticut Department of Transportation Highway Safety Office Drug Recognition Enforcement Instructor Grant. Do I have a motion? Councilmember Sutton. Floor is yours.
Okay, good evening, everybody. So the Connecticut Department of Transportation, the Highway Safety Office, Connecticut DOT, has approved our application by the City of Norwalk Police Department for funding under the Drug Recognition Enforcement, which is a DRE instructor grant. This is an annual grant that we're awarded, and it was applied for and approved for the amount of $44,659.38. The funding start date was October 9th and ends in September 30th of 2025. What this grant does, it funds, it provides funding to combat large increase of number of drivers using marijuana or illegal drugs between 2018 and 2022. Over 50% of drivers involved in fatal car crashes have tested positive for drugs. So the Highway Safety Plan calls for high visibility enforcement of impaired drivers, public information and education on the risk, dangers, and consequences of driving while impaired. The plan also calls for the training of law enforcement officers in the latest methods of drug evaluation and classification, and to certify our officers as drug recognition experts. So this is basically a level up from DUI enforcement and DUI training. And when people take the impaired driver tests, you know, like the walk and turn test that you see out there for driving under the influence of alcohol, it's different for under the influence of any type of drug, whether they are legal or legally have a legal subscription for it. So the funding provides statewide coordination in our field sobriety tested and advanced roadside impaired driving enforcement. It will also be used to facilitate training for the convictions in court procedures beyond the alcohol impairment.
Okay, sorry, my screen froze for a second.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Chief Laporte. Does anyone have any questions, comments about this item? If not, all in favor? Okay, that is unanimous. Now, the second item is, I'm sorry, just to make sure, the second item is actually connected to the first item, correct?
No.
Okay, all right, just
So
wanted
it will be
to.
the second item, and then I have we're gonna.
Yes, and we will make a special, let's do this first and then we'll make a motion here.
Okay.
So item number 2, oh, Michelle?
Yep. So item 1 and 2 were related to the drug enforcement
Right, so I
resolution.
realized we moved one of them, we didn't move the other, so I'm wondering if we
Oh,
would just.
yes, I'm sorry.
Yep.
So I
One
think.
was for
why don't
mayor
I
and
just
one
read
was
it?
for the
We'll
chief.
take a quick vote and then we'll make a motion here.
Yes.
Okay. Authorize Chief of Police James Walsh to execute any and all documents and agreements as may be necessary to implement the Connecticut Department of Transportation Highway Safety Office Drug Recognition Enforcement Instructor Grant. I need a motion. Councilmember Ayers. Since we just discussed this, unless there's anything else that needs to be added here. If not, all in favor? Okay. That is unanimous. All right, now, so the reason I'm talking about making a motion, I don't know if you guys saw, well, Deputy Chief Lepore, why don't you explain why we need to make a slight change to the agenda? In addition.
Yeah, thank you. So items number 3 and 4 all pertain to one grant. It's an ARPA grant, and I can explain that to you in a few minutes. But if you see at it, the grant award number is the last portion of it says 2A on that. So as of this morning, when we were talking with the State Department regarding that grant, they had advised us that there's actually 1A, which was an amendment also, that we had not utilized, and that they were going to, they awarded us, and we never used the funds, and we never accepted the grant. So they were allowing us to get awarded 1A and 2A. So the grant is identical. What they did was they provided more funding for us in both of these grants, and they also extended the usage time for the grant. So they extended for 1 year. So we get to use twice the amount of money in the same year. So the grant itself is from the State Department of Energy. It's called the ARPA grant, and that's for the American Rescue Plan Act. The grant was awarded to the Nauk Police Department. The original grant was awarded in 2021, which has been accepted and received, and it has been utilized. Then they awarded more funding in 2023 and then again in 2024, which is the 1A and the 2A of the grants. So the police department has experienced a surge in individuals committing auto theft and other crimes related to auto theft within the city of Norwalk and our surrounding municipalities. This funding will pay for an increase in police patrol to help deter auto thefts, violent crimes, and criminal acts from taking place. The amendments 1A and 2A of the grant allow us for the increase of proactive marked and unmarked police cars, criminal investigations into the suspects, or the purchase of approved auto theft and violence-related equipment. So we are requesting that the mayor authorize and execute all documents and agreements necessary to accept funding under the State Department of Emergency Services, DEPP, ARPA Grant 2A, and then authorize the Chief of Police to execute all documents and agreements as may be necessary to implement the DESPP, ARPA Grant 1A and 2A.
Okay, so why don't we do, well, first of all, I am curious as to why this happened.
So
like why we didn't accept the grant the first time.
We didn't know we had it. So our grant coordinator had retired. And then the other person that was in charge of the grants came in and started doing all the reporting. So the reporting ended in January of 2024, and he had done all the reporting. And we weren't aware that this had come out because nobody told us. They had nobody to send it to. Okay. The logical question that follows this is, are there other grants that maybe we may have earned and we don't know if That's a good question. That's a good question.
I don't know if that's something, I mean, I realize this all happened today, but I do think that's something that's going to need to be reviewed, because if there's grant money out there.
Yes, so we have a
Yeah.
lieutenant that has jumped into this position and has hit the ground running and has done a phenomenal job.
Okay.
Trying to report, do our grant reporting to the state and the feds, and has become our forensic accountant, even though that's not in his wheelhouse. But he has done a phenomenal job, and he's come to, we talk every 5 minutes about this, and he was like, hey, you're not going to believe this, what they just came out and what they told me, because when we start doing all our reporting, they said, you still have this was pending, and they're willing to give us the extension on it if we can get it signed and get it through.
Okay, and they know that, I mean, assuming we pass this item tonight, it goes to the council again in a couple of weeks, and they understand that this could pass. This is not going to pass tomorrow. They're aware of that, correct?
Yes. I've also run it by Corporation Counsel, Darren Callahan. And because the grant is we already had assigned the original one, he has no problem with the mayor signing the amendment 1A and 2A.
Okay. But for purposes of tonight, we need to make a motion to amend. I don't exactly know the right verbiage for this, but basically it's amend our agenda.
Well, but was 1A already approved?
No.
Not on this.
The grant was approved by the state, and yes, and has been given to us for
It's
funding.
never come before us before.
No, it has not.
No, which is why they're requesting the authorization now. Jim.
Got it.
Right, for the amendment to the action item.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I'm gonna assume the agenda item that you want to appear on the council agenda is what's at the bottom of the first page of the memo you sent out this evening.
Yes. Yes, please.
So why don't we do this? I'm gonna need a motion to amend the agenda to add the following two items. One, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute any and all documents and agreements necessary to accept grant funding under the State of Connecticut Department of Energy Services and Public Protection, ARPA, ATV 2023 NWK1 grant. And two, authorize Chief of Police James Walsh to execute any and all documents and agreements as may be necessary to implement the State of Connecticut Department of Energy Services and Public Protection, ARPA, ATV 2023 NWK1A grant. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay. Councilmember Freyer, all in favor on putting this item on the agenda? Okay, that's unanimous. Now,
thank you.
Let's.
I voted. My hand won't go up, but I vote for it.
Okay, so that was a unanimous. We'll mark for the minutes. It's a unanimous vote. And what we're going to do, since we've effectively discussed that this is two iterations of the same grant for the same purpose, correct?
Yes.
But could I ask a question on that though?
Sure.
Because is it earmarked for auto theft?
Yes.
Because the first one, so we have to use the money for auto theft surveillance and so forth?
Yes, it's to help deter auto theft and any crimes that are related to the auto theft. So whether it's car burglaries,
that's part of the grant.
Yes, it's all part of the grant. It's all written in there. There's specific stipulations, which I did attach the grant to your package.
Yeah.
And that grant was for 2A, but it's identical to 1A. And I actually submitted that electronically to you guys earlier.
Okay, so do we have any flexibility for using the 1A at this point, since we didn't use it and now it's just available? Or is it earmarked for auto theft as well?
It's identical. It's earmarked for the auto theft and any crimes related to the auto theft, or if we want to buy any equipment related to auto theft.
Jim, it's the same grant, just two iterations of the same thing. And there are strings attached to the grant.
Yeah. So my only question, my thought was that if it was free money, could we use it for traffic speeding, more patrol for speeders and stuff like that? Because everybody's crying about that all the time.
So we would have to look into what the equipment would be. And if the equipment stipulates anything like it would be more of
like our flock system that we use, like our cameras.
Yeah.
For the ALPR readers, so if we have stolen cars going by in the area trying to get on I-95 or down MLK or,
Yeah.
Connecticut Avenue, we could use it for that type of equipment.
So it could be used for traffic control as well as looking for stolen cars.
Yes.
Or funds can be used for this that may, that would be used for this kind of thing can now be used for other purposes. But these grant funds, it's just basically it's $70,000 total between the two
Yes.
grants
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what I'm saying.
are used for this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Does anyone else have any comments, questions, thoughts about these two sets of grants? Okay, so why don't we do this? I think we probably need to take two, instead of voting on all four, I think we'll do votes on both of the 1A items and votes on both of the 2A items because they're both connected. So why don't we do this? So now that the agenda has been amended, I'm first going to read in the 1A items. So I have to read this again. Authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute any and all documents and agreements necessary to accept grant the funding under State of Connecticut's Department of Energy Services and Public Protection, ARPA ATV 2023 NWK 1A grant. And 2, authorize Chief of Police James Walsh to execute any and all documents and agreements as may be necessary to implement the State of Connecticut Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection, ARPA ATV 2023 NWK 1A grant. Do I have a motion for both of those items? Councilmember Freyer. Okay. Does anyone have any additional questions, or if not, I will call for a vote. All in favor on taking these two items forward to the council? Okay, that's unanimous. And now the last two items, and Michelle, I realize I've completely not set the proper number order, but I think everyone gets what we're doing here. Authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute any and all documents and agreements necessary to accept grant funding under the State of Connecticut's Department of Energy Services and Public Protection, ARPA ATV 2023 NWK 2A grant. And authorize Chief of Police James Walsh to execute any and all documents and agreements as may be necessary to implement the State of Connecticut Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection, ARPA ATV 2023 NWK 2A grant. Do I have a motion to move both of those items? Councilmember Edie, raise your hand, make the motion.
Yeah,
I'm
Mr.
giving it to
Sutton
the
had his hand up.
Yeah, Mr.
Sutton had his hand
Sutton
up.
had his hand
I'm
up.
giving him motions. All right. All right. All right. Councilmember, even it's Councilmember Edie. There we go. All right. Does anyone have any further comments, questions, or anything on these items? If not, all in favor of taking them to the council? All right, that is unanimous. Okay, one more motion to go. Councilmember Edie. She's not saying it, but it's a motion to adjourn.
I could.
Thank you guys. Well, I appreciate all your time and your
you.
effort with this.
All right, and Michelle, tell me before we leave here, there are no issues with what we did on the amendment and all that sort of stuff. It's all of it's gone through.
Yep. Yeah, and I talked to Irene earlier about this, so I'll make it all make sense before it gets to common council.
Yeah, if you want to just do it so that it's, where 3 and 4 is the 2A and you just add as 5 and 6 the 1A. I mean, so long as it's on the agenda, it doesn't matter what order it's in.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good
Have a
night.
good night.
Thanks very much.
Take care.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night. See you.
All right.
Bye.